I'm McKinney Smith. After going through a divorce, my sister passing away, experiencing narcissistic abuse, and some significant health scares, I realized through sharing my story that I wasn't alone in my suffering. Suffering, subjective distress generated by the experience of being out of balance. In a deep dive to holistically heal mind, body, and soul is where I discovered peace, clarity, and connection. It is impossible to be truly wise without some real-life hardship, and we cannot develop post-traumatic wisdom without making it through, and most importantly, through it together. Social connection builds resilience, and resilience helps create post-traumatic wisdom, and that wisdom leads to hope. Hope for you and others witnessing and participating in your healing, and hope for your community. A healthy community is a healing community, and a healing community is full of hope because it has seen its own people weather, survive, and thrive. Senait Litchmore is a registered psychotherapist and coach. Senait's passion to empower women was birthed from her lived experience and is sustained by her desire to help break toxic cycles and walk with women to heal their relationship with themselves and others through individual counseling. She's provided therapeutic support for individuals and families since 2010. Senait is married to her college sweetheart and a mother of 3 who enjoys family outings, stimulating conversations, and retail therapy. So please welcome to the show, Senait Litchmore.
Thanks for having me, McKinney. We're definitely going to laugh a lot this episode because we're already started in that area.
Yes, absolutely. Like, honestly, I feel like, so I've been wanting to have you on the show for a while. So I'm glad that we're finally able to do this. And I guess I love interviewing people that I've watched for a while or admired, I'm inspired by, that I feel like I have a glimpse into your life thanks to social media, but I know that I don't know you through social media. So when I get to have these conversations, you get deeper, you get to know the person a lot more. But I have watched your evolution. I think we started following each other from before you even had kids. So I am excited to jump into this conversation. And now that, you're a psychotherapist and all that good stuff, like I'm obsessed with how people function. So I'm looking forward to the wisdom that you also have to share. So thank you for agreeing to do this today.
Thanks for having me, McKinney. And the first time I met you, you spoke at a youth event that we arranged. I think it was 2014. So I had my first child, who was 1. I was like, is this woman? How come I've never heard of her before? I was sitting beside your daughter, and I just love that you brought your child with you. So that was the first time. I just couldn't believe it. I've never met you before.
I was thinking about it last night, and I was like, yes, the very first, interesting enough, because you were one of the youth leaders for the church at the time, right? So to the listeners' backstory, we attended the same church. You were a youth leader. I was just getting into the public speaking space. I think that was like the first year that I started speaking publicly. So my nerves were shot.
No one noticed.
Thank you. But I do completely remember that day. The church was doing something for Halloween to keep the youth motivated. And it was, to me, the event in itself, for me, that was my first time being at something like that. I thought it was beautiful, actually. But yeah, I remember the first time we met as well.
Time flies.
Wow. Okay. Okay, so before I go even deeper into that, because you're talking about sitting beside my daughter and that I had brought my kids, and I want to definitely dive down into the path of parenting and how we both have learned to parent different from our parents. But before we get there, I love to start at the very beginning and get to understand a little bit more about who you were as a child. So as an icebreaker question, because I understand that, as people, we think in pictures, but as kids, we have these vivid imaginations. And as we start to evolve and get older, whether it be our parents unintentionally or intentionally, or even society starts to limit our beliefs and try to shift and shape us into who they think we should be. I would love to know, who or what you wanted to be as a little girl.
Yeah, I mean, as a little girl, I didn't know what I wanted to be. I felt like I could be anything. I definitely felt like the possibilities were endless. I was a very optimistic, happy type of child. I was also really helpful. I did like to help, whether it was like the teacher, my mom. And so it does make sense that I'm in this profession. But I was also like an advocate. Like I remember my parents scolding me, like, you're not an advocate. I didn't know what that word meant because I always like stuck up for my siblings. I was always defending people. I was always making sure things were equal and fair. And so as the oldest of 6 kids, I definitely took on like a leadership role at each age. So I knew that was probably the direction I was heading in, but I didn't feel any pressure to figure out what I wanted to be.
I love that. I love that. So do you have, in terms of like your childhood memory that defines who you are today, can you recall your earliest childhood memory?
Wow, that's such a I think my earliest childhood memory is it's so funny. It's actually when I was 2. I'll never remember. I remember this day because there's a picture. It was my birthday, and my mom asked me to get a chair, and I remember thinking, "It's my birthday. I don't want to get it." So I was a little bit entitled, but I was I think I was like a powerful kid. Like I owned my power and like I wanted to be in control and I wanted my autonomy. And so like that agency, that control of like who I am and what I want, I think was very apparent even as a child. Like and I was very vocal. Like I wasn't afraid to express myself as a child. So I would say like that's my earliest memories.
Okay. Do you think that has anything to do with you being the eldest of 6 kids?
Of course. 100%. And I think my parents came to Canada as refugees and my mom was pregnant with me when she came. And so I think being the first child, I was given a lot of love and attention. But then 2 years later, my sister was born. And then every 2 years, more and more children came. And definitely my role in the family shifted over time. I wouldn't say that I felt the same way growing up. Definitely as a child, I did feel like I had a certain level of power. And so growing up, my parents had a lot of fear, right? They were immigrants. They weren't really familiar with this country. My mom didn't know the language and they were just afraid of everything. And I was not afraid. Like I was not a fearful kid. And so there was a lot of conflict, I would say maybe from the age of like 8 or 9 when I really started to push back on my trying to keep me in a bubble and trying to live a certain way. And I was just like, no, like and I pushed back, I think the rest of my life, to be honest. I don't think I ever stopped. I ever stopped fighting. And then I grew up in like subsidized housing in Toronto. And I think you did too.
Yep.
And so, we call it the hood. We grew up in the hood. And even though Toronto, it was still pretty rough. And so my parents did have reason to fear because there were dangers outside of our doors. And there were guys selling drugs right outside our building. And there were things happening. And so, but for me, like that was home. Like this was my community. I didn't really feel afraid even because that was my normal.
That was, Yep.
Exactly. And so there was always this like tension of like trying to keep us inside, trying to shelter us. And then there was always me trying to push back. And I wanted a sense of belonging. I wanted to be part of my community. I wanted to be outside, but I wasn't really allowed to. And that just continued for a long time, I would say.
Wow. Okay. So now there's like 2 separate paths I want to go down based on what you just said. Like, okay. So I'm going to say first generation Canadian.
Yeah.
There typically comes with a lot of pressures from the family. But then hearing that, you had no fear and you gave a lot of pushback, because I'm almost like, okay, well, did you feel that type of pressure as a first generation Canadian? Were you given any type of pressure of what, career paths you had to take or what you was expected of you, but then also knowing what you just said about your personality, did you push back with that if there was any of that?
In my home, my parents didn't really push us academically. I would say they pushed us more like morality. Like they wanted us to be good. So they wanted us to dress a certain way. So and I think that's where Christianity played a big role. Like my parents were really strict Christians, and they became more strict over time. And so they were very there was a lot of control in terms of like how you look, how you live your life, what music you listen to, what movies you watch, how short your skirt is. And so there was a lot of pressure in that area because how I dressed was a reflection of them. Because I came from a more like community shame-based type of culture where there's no individualism. So what I do is my community, my family. And so there was a lot of pressure in that sense to be good and to do good so that I don't bring shame to the family. I liked school. I wouldn't say I was strong academically, but I never like skipped class. I always did my homework. So maybe that's why there wasn't a lot of pressure. I don't think I really pushed. I don't think I really rebelled academically. Yeah.
So growing up between representing your parents and the culture and I guess being, what's the word I'm looking for? Fitting into, I guess, the mold of, I guess, who they...
Yeah, it's like this tension between who they want me to be and who I want to be. And then Canadian individualism culture. And then my parents' East African culture. And it's like this clash, this like cultural clash that just existed for a long time.
Yes. So how did that get you to where you are today? Because there's all these different layers of, being the eldest of six, first generation Canadian, strict Christian, representing the family, all of these layers.
Yeah.
So how did that affect who you are today? Give us the Coles Notes version of how you got to where you are today that meshed all of those things.
Yeah, because we could be here all day. Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, when I think I was around 16, that's when I started working in my community. So I got a job at the local health center, and I think I was doing like some intergenerational thing with like youth and parents. Like this is at 16 years old. And that's kind of where I found my calling. And so I worked in the local community and I really found a sense of belonging. And I was able to recognize the privileges that I had, whether it's like I had a 2-parent household, my parents were supportive in certain areas. And so I used what I did have to give back. And that sense of belonging, that sense of giving back was something that was very important to me. It was like a high value of mine. And it just kind of went on from there. I went on, whether working at community camps, whether joining local community organizations where I was just a volunteer. And then once I went to university, same thing. Like I was in community groups and I was always working towards mobilizing young people and just essentially being the person I needed as right. That was my driving point. It was like, oh, I wish I had this when I was a kid. I wish I had this when I was a teenager. And that kind of propelled me towards where I am today. Like just really trying to be that person and using the tools and the resources I have to give back.
I love it. I love it. So what inspired you to want to become a therapist?
It's interesting because I kind of fell into it. Like I wouldn't say I wanted to be a therapist. That's not really how I started my but I worked with youth for a long time. And so there came to a point once I graduated and I got my first job working with youth, I realized this is not sustainable if I just work with the child, because we can do all this great work together, but once they go back to their neighborhood, back to their homes, they're back in that system. And they're essentially youth and children are a result of their environment, And I was like, okay, like I want to do lasting work. I want to do sustainable work. And then that's what was my introduction to therapy. It's like, maybe I should try to be a therapist so then I can work with parents. I can work with adults. I can work with what's within the system versus a part of the system. And so yeah, that's 2010, like I started as a family therapist, actually working again in subsidized housing neighborhoods. So I was working in different neighborhoods in Scarborough and going into homes, providing family counseling, crisis work. It was very, very intense. But again, because I knew what it was like to live in those neighborhoods, I knew it was like what it was like to live in families with high conflict, just a lot of cultural, generational clashes. Like I had so much propelling me. I had so much energy. I had so much drive. I had so much passion. Like to me, I didn't even associate my work with the paycheck at that time. Like I wanted to do this work. Like I loved doing this work. And yeah, that was kind of the beginning of my career.
So growing up in those environments, like you said, we both grew up in subsidized housing. We see a lot, we hear a lot, we may experience a lot, and then you've got, the other situations that are maybe happening in the house and all these things. Like, how has that affected how you parent now?
Yeah. And so for me, when I became a parent, I thought I did think I knew it all, to be honest. I got this. I've been working with youth and families. Like I got this on lock. I know what to do. But when I was practicing the theories that we were teaching the families we were working with, which is more behavioral focused, I realized I don't want this. Like I don't want this type of dynamic where I'm rewarding consequences and more focused on how my child is acting versus like our relationship. And then I also realized that I was still that reactive part of me that I thought was put to rest kind of appeared once I became a parent again. Like I realized I had a short fuse. I had low patience. I was getting angry easily. Like, and I don't really yell, but I could be intimidating to my kids in other ways. And so it was really hard for my first kid, who was a very sensitive child and just couldn't, she was very sensitive. And I didn't know how to deal with that sensitivity because I couldn't relate to that. And that's why I was like, okay, I need to do some research because this isn't good. I knew how kids turned out like her who didn't have the right support because I saw that. I saw the sensitive kids who felt like they weren't loved, who felt like they didn't have a sense of belonging. And I'm like, this is the path that we're on if I continue these parenting methods. And so I really focused on our connection. And then that was too challenging. I had to then focus on myself. I had on regulating myself. I had to really unlearn why do these things trigger me? Why is my child crying getting me mad? Like this doesn't make sense. Why are tears getting me upset? Because there wasn't space for me to cry when I was a kid. There wasn't a space for me to show vulnerable emotions. There's this belief that like we were born this way, but I think everyone has emotions. Everyone has a range of emotions, but sometimes we adapt certain behaviors to feel secured and loved by our parents. Like if we know crying is going to break the connection between me and my parent, guess what? I'm not going to cry because I want a relationship intact. But when you have a sensitive kid who it's a lot harder for them to keep those emotions at bay, they're going to say, "Oh, I'm not lovable because I cry. My parents don't love me because I'm sensitive." They're going to like internalize the disconnect that happens when they cry. And definitely didn't want that. So that kind of started my journey.
Wow.
To parenting intentionally.
I have like goosebumps right now. So I've always been extremely sensitive my entire life. So everything you talked about, I can completely relate because my family didn't understand me. I feel like they still don't.
Wow.
So when you talked about trying to build that connection with your daughter and that wasn't working, and then you had to look at yourself and regulating your own emotions, I want to get deeper into that because I know that there are a lot of people that are listening, not just moms, but people that are listening that, one, obviously when it comes to a relationship with another human being, it's, we're trying to build that connection to make it deeper, but then sometimes we're like, well, why is this not working? Why is there friction? All these things. And I feel like the first thought isn't to look at ourselves. So maybe let's start with like some emotional regulation tips that we can give to those that are listening.
Yeah. Um, Before we even go there, you said something that stood out to me, and I want to touch on it. I think we really need to have self-awareness, you know. Um, some of us are naturally more externalizers, and some of us are naturally more internalizers, meaning like when something goes wrong, some of us tend to say, "What did I do that caused
Mm-hmm.
it? How did I contribute to that?" And then there's other people that will externalize. Oh, that person caused this issue. Incident made me feel this way. And so when we recognize where we are on the spectrum, and one or the other isn't a bad thing, but we need to realize where we are in the spectrum. I think that's vital to reel it in a bit. So if you tend to be more of an internalizer, kind of exploring what are some external factors that contributed to how I feel, and then vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I had to do, like as someone that's naturally more of an externalizer, I had to look inward. And
Mm-hmm.
so whatever you do the opposite. Be like, okay, instead of me being upset at everyone else, what's happening inside of me? What thoughts are coming up for me? What emotions are coming up for me? What does this mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's vital. One thing that really helped me regulate my emotions is being in tune with my body. And so I had to learn what the signs were that I was getting angry. I had to learn what's happening physically for me before I get to this place where I want to explode.
Mm-hmm.
And so notice something's rising from my stomach to my chest. And so when I notice that sensation, I take a deep breath. I ask myself, what's going on? What's triggering this anger? What thoughts do I have right now? How do I feel right now? Because when you're able to do that, you're able to notice the pattern. So I was able to notice there were certain patterns that got me really upset, certain triggers. So one thing was when I felt like I was being taken advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you can hear low. And so I would have to ask myself, am I actually being taken advantage of in this situation? Or does it feel like I'm being taken advantage of? So we need to separate logic from emotions. What's
Mm-hmm.
the evidence that I'm being taken advantage of? What's the evidence that I'm not being taken advantage of? What are some alternative possibilities in this situation? And so before and the thing is, sometimes we try to start at the investigative work, like we try to start with the questions, but we really need to start with recognizing our physical sensations.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes when we're so dysregulated, we're disconnected from the part of our brain that intellectualizes, our prefrontal cortex that understands. But we are always connected to our physical body, like that's the survival part of our brain, right? That's always going to be accessible. And so when we're able to connect to our physical body, and we're able to get to a certain level of regulation, then can we go to the logic, and then we can start to investigate and ask questions. But we can't get there until we regulate physically. And I know it's not cool, but like deep breaths is so transformative. So
Absolutely.
taking the deep breath, tuning in, slowing down, and then going from there, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So my middle child, she had a couple of years where she had severe health challenges before she had her baby recently. And it was very traumatic for her, but also for us that were her main caregivers. And she would have a lot of panic attacks and a lot of, because she was having chronic vomiting and wasn't able to eat and all these things were happening to her. And she was suicidal. She was done with dealing with all of the stuff she was dealing with. And I'm going to say, as a parent who grew up not having the emotional support and having to be the main emotional and physical support while someone is going through all these things, without me having any formal training or anything like that, like having this conversation with you right now and, getting, I guess, after the fact, confirmation from my therapist and things like that, like the tools that I was using with her were not only helping her, but also helping me in the process in terms of like the breathing, the being still, the, just even holding her hand, connecting with her, like massaging her back, all of those things just, I guess, intuitively that I was doing to support her that was helping her calm her nervous system, but also helping me calm mine when I was internally freaking out.
Wow. And that's what we call co-regulation.
Yeah.
I think that's actually the most powerful,
Yeah.
like it sounds like you guys were healing together at the same time. And what I'm
Mm-hmm.
also hearing is like you were kind of showing up for your younger self
Mm-hmm.
who needed that at 20, at whatever age your daughter's at,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and that's so powerful.
I think the last few years have been the most transformative for me in terms of healing my younger self. My therapist said to me, my last session, she's like, you've done a lot of work for younger McKinney. You're doing the work, you're setting the boundaries, you're doing that. Like, so let's focus on something else. but but obviously, the work is never done. But yeah, like let's talk about how us working on ourselves and healing those childhood wounds and childhood traumas and learning to regulate our emotions to become better parents, for the next generation. Like, what are some things that you're presently doing that you feel are working with your children? Because obviously every child's different, but
Yeah. Yeah. I think one thing that I have done was like learn how to slow down. Like I'm a naturally fast, efficient type of person. I have I feel really valuable when I get a lot of things done. And so thankfully with COVID, like I was forced to slow down. Um, and that has been so amazing. I think that has strengthened our relationship more than anything. It's helped me regulate, and it's also helped my kids know like I enjoy their presence. We
mm-hmm,
don't do something for me to enjoy their presence. And it helped me put certain systems in place and certain like patterns. And so I remember I used to be so when I a couple like years ago I used to be really really like persistent with like having strict routines. And so I'm like, every Wednesday we go to the library, every Tuesday we do this. And I just really wanted to do that. But it was costing me so much by doing that. And so instead I focus more on like rhythms, not necessarily strict routines. And
mm-hmm,
and that has been really great. Like, yeah, sometimes we read a bedtime story at night, sometimes we don't, but we always have bedtime around the same time. I always hug you around the same time. And so kind of easing off of the strict routines and like what I have
mm-hmm,
to do, and focusing more on rhythms. I think also like focusing on your values. I think as parents, it's easy to feel like I want to do everything, like,
mm-hmm,
and you can't. Like, I want to build a successful business, and I want to lose 30 pounds, and I want to transform my eating, and I want to show up for my friends. I like just want to do everything. But you have to like understand, like you have to recognize what are my values right now, and what season am I in?
mm-hmm.
You know, seasons change.
Absolutely.
And now, like as my youngest is going to be 5, and it's like I'm in a different season of parenting. I'm
Mm-hmm,
not in the diaper stage anymore. I'm not in the hands-on stage anymore. I'm in the teaching them how to be independent and giving them those skills. And so there's more space for me to also live life, and kind of change my priorities. And so yeah, just recognizing your season, recognizing your capacity. I think we
mm-hmm,
focus a lot on capabilities, but not enough on our capacity, whether it's our capacity that day, our capacity that week. Because we really believe that like our value is in what we do. We really believe like our value is in how much money we make, how much FaceTime we have with our kids, and how much. But is the things that you can't measure are valuable, you know.
mm-hmm. Yep.
Even simply like looking my kids in the eyes and talking to them for 5 minutes. Like
Yeah.
that's so minor, but it's huge,
Yeah.
huge. Or even when I pick them up after school, instead of asking them a million questions, I just say, "You look happy today. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm so happy to see your face." Or like, "I
Mm-hmm.
really do," and that's it.
Yeah.
Like act like delighting in them, like
Yeah.
delight presence, delighting in their company, um, is so beautiful. And
Yeah.
that I've noticed so many beautiful outcomes from practicing parenting in that way.
I love that. Like, because I'm such a heavy emotional person, I'm listening to you talk and I'm trying to keep the smile on my face because I'm like, I want to cry. Yeah, you spoke about seasons, and I feel like in terms of even not even just seasons as the kids get older, but like seasons as a person. I feel like my kids, each of them has gotten a different version of me because of the season that I was in at that age or that stage of my life. And now, like, my kids are old now. Like, my youngest is 18, my middle daughter's 22, and my eldest just turned 26. So we're in a stage now where, especially because I'm going to therapy every week, it's like I've always allowed my kids to speak their mind. As long as you're respectful, say what you want to say. No problem. Say it. Just be respectful. But now we're at the point where, because they're technically all adults, where they're expressing things that happened when they were kids that they didn't understand, that they're now still trying to understand. And us being able to have those open conversations and me expressing that was the season I was in at that. I didn't know any better. I didn't, you know what I mean? I was not aware, I've apologized every day, apologizing for things that I had no control over. I didn't know, or that I did unintentionally and didn't know, had an effect. Something as simple as, my daughter said to me the other day, something about the lunches I used to send her to school with, and her being upset with, the smells that, when you open them in the classroom, and why did you do this? And why did you send me, with this for lunch, and all these things. And being able to honestly say to her, like, I, in that season, had just become a single parent. I was a full-time entrepreneur. I didn't have it. I was giving you what I could afford, that I thought was healthy, that I thought you would eat, that I thought would make a difference. Like, being able to have those open conversations and for them to understand, yeah, mommy, now that you guys are adults, mommy's doing well for herself, making six figures, not worrying about the things that I used to worry about. But back then, like, I'm trying to feed 3 kids and pay a mortgage and take care of a dog, and I'm making like $25,000 a year. Like, I'm doing the best that I can.
Wow.
So being able to be open and have those conversations with them, like, my mother never had those conversations with me. Like, she was just angry. So I feel like the season that I'm in with my kids, the level of transparency that we're able to have and the openness of conversations, like, definitely changing the type of, I guess, parenting that I had, has been not only healing for me, but I'm hoping healing for them.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. It sounds like you guys have like a really great relationship, and especially that, they're adults and they're having those type of conversations with you, and it's not ending in like a big blow up or cutting each other off for months. Like, I feel like that's goals for a lot of us.
I feel like in their teenage years, the way that I was raising them, I know that a lot of people on the outside probably wouldn't agree with, because I gave them the freedom and the space to be who they wanted to be. There was no, well, there's guidance, and there's, I want to say, like I said before, like, being respectful and all those things, but it was like, you want to wear makeup, go ahead. You want to go, like, explore, right?
Yeah.
You're free to do that. I wasn't allowed to do all these things. You're free to do things within a certain, I guess, context. But I got a lot of flack, I'd say, from people with, oh, she allows her kids to do this, or like, her kids say that online, or they do this, or they do that. I allowed them the freedom to be who they wanted to be. But I also feel like it may, everything comes with its pros and cons. But now that they are old enough where, I'm going to say, they can appreciate certain things, and they can also communicate what didn't work or what they felt didn't work. Or even, I feel like, even things that I may have done with the best intentions where they didn't see it that way. So, us being able to have those conversations. But anyway, I forgot what my point was. So
But I think when I hear you saying that, like I'm hearing about values, right? And I think I don't know why we think everyone has the same values or we need to uphold the same values. And sometimes when someone's living a certain way or raising their kids a certain way, it's almost like you feel like you're criticizing what I'm doing, but you're
Hmm.
not doing that. Like it sounds like you were being true to your values with what you knew at that time and you were doing your best and you didn't have that shame. And I think
Hmm.
whether it's in the Black community, whether it's in different cultural communities, there is like a level of like you gotta stay in this
Yeah.
realm. And you notice it in other cultures, whether it's like Canadian, American, white culture, like they're a lot more individualistic. And so there might
Hmm.
not be like level of shame and I have to make sure my kids stay in a certain box, especially if there's no like religion or whatever
Hmm.
content. So yeah, I think that's huge. Because I think sometimes we take on values that we actually don't value because like
Hmm.
we're parenting unconsciously or we're living unconsciously
Hmm.
and you feel shame because you think this is something you disagree with, but if you were really to investigate you're like I didn't really think about this. Actually, I'm just kind of continuing the values of the people I see online or my family or my community and all that.
Hmm. And let's talk about community and how that affects our parenting and how it affects our healing. Because I feel like, okay, I'll use an example. The church that I stopped attending there probably at the beginning of the pandemic, but the church that we used to go to, or I say I used to go to, I don't know if you still go there, but, but I went there, quote unquote, religiously for like 12 years, every Sunday. And then I started going every Wednesday as well. And it was almost like a routine with my kids. There was no thought or even question to say, are you guys coming? It wasn't until probably when my girls hit 18 or so, or I gave them the choice of whether or not they wanted to attend. But it was like feeling I'm going to say feeling criticized, even in that environment where I'm feeling like I'm in an environment that's supposed to be community. I'm supposed to feel a certain way, but I'm single mom who's coming in there dragging her three kids and, getting side eyed and having certain comments made or what have you, to the point where my kids are like, we don't even feel welcome in the youth environment there. We don't want to go. Like, no thanks. So I feel like that affected even their view of that community, but I allowed them to find their own communities and their own spaces where they felt safe, where they felt they could be who they are or who they want to be.
Mhm.
Um, so I'd love to know how community has affected your parenting and your healing.
Yeah. I think for me, I've always been critical of the communities that I've been a part of because just with my cultural community, there was a lot of things that, I didn't really agree with. And because I did have like I would say like I really was a strong Christian from like 14. Like for me, it was like I separated my religion from my parents and this was like my own religion. That's how I saw it. So even sometimes when my parents tried to weaponize Christianity and say like, you shouldn't do this because you're a Christian, I would say, well, I read the Bible and I don't see it that way. And so I'm going to keep doing this thing.
Mhm.
Felt very empowered in my faith. And I was very aware as a teenager that there were things that I did, whether it's because in our culture, women are are very like meek, right? Or like quiet and humble. And I just wasn't like that. And I always had friends from different cultures, and so I didn't have this pull like I need to be a woman like that. I
Mhm.
I felt empowered to be me, and I knew it went against the culture. And so there were aspects of the culture that I did like the sense of community and people coming together when in times of need and that type of thing. But I was never worried about going against the culture. And so I think sometimes when we're part of these communities, like the church we went to, there's like a false sense of community where it looks like community and it's supposed to be, and everyone says it is, but it actually isn't,
Right.
because no one knows you and
Right.
people are not walking with you and lifting you up. And so I had to get to a point where I had to build my own community, you
Mhm.
know, and I think as a teenager, I always found people from like the outskirts because I never felt like I fully belonged. And so, like a lot of my friends had different challenges too, whether it's at home or like not pursuing post-secondary education or just some type of instability, because I looked at myself as having some type of instability too. But that helped me because it helped me create a family. And so I think now the church I go to, I do feel like I have a real community and I can really show up. And that was important to me. And so with my kids, I'm really big on like this is your community. We are a family. And even if you do things that maybe I don't agree with, there's always that unconditional love and that unconditional support. And that's my hope that they would also get. But yeah, it's like the false sense of community and the real community is such a big issue.
Yeah.
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 You know? I'm really sorry though that you guys experienced that, because I don't feel like our church had a real sense of community. I think there were pockets. Whole, I don't think they created an atmosphere for people to be plugged in.
Agreed.
You know?
Like I started going there when I had my son. My sister brought me, he was a couple months old, still fully breastfeeding. And then I probably, like I said, stopped around the time of the pandemic. So he was in like 7th grade or something like that. So I was there every week for so many years and knew no one. It was just, you see people, they see you, but the people who probably interacted with me the most was the security team. They were the kindest to me ever. And they helped me move twice. Their wives hated me, but I went for the word and went home. I did not feel like I was a part of the community.
I'm so sorry. And I do want to say, like, one thing that really helped me in my healing journey is like learning how to see God as like my father. Because I think sometimes when we go to these churches that have such strong like presence, we confuse like the church pastor with like, is this God or is this the church pastor? And it kind of can get a little bit muddled. It's like our critical thinking sometimes when the culture is like so strong. And so for me, really, what really helped me was like understanding who God is through the scriptures and how he shows up for me. And so I always struggled with, for example, with self-compassion. And sometimes when, certain pastors will really put emphasis on the God that's like the vengeful God and this and that. But really, for me, looking in the scripture and seeing that God that's compassionate, the God that's merciful, the God that's faithful, the God that's consistent, the God that doesn't change. It's like gave me permission to be self-compassionate towards myself, to move from like this harsh inner critic to being so hard on myself and shameful to being more kinder and compassionate, learning how to forgive myself, for the way I parented, the way I've been a friend, the mistakes I made in my life, is like learning like God uses it all. Like God uses missteps, God uses the mistakes, he uses everything, and like nothing is wasted. And like really transforming my perspective of God, which actually happened during the pandemic, helped me be so much kinder to myself. And then I was able to be kinder to my kids.
Yes.
But I didn't realize how mean I was to myself. And I really thought this was like, oh yeah, because like this is how God talks to people, and this is how my parents talk to me. So it was so normal that I didn't even like criticize it. There was no curiosity around that. I just accepted the way my inner voice spoke to me when I made mistakes and when I didn't get things right, when I wasn't efficient. But now it's like, yeah, it's totally changed.
I love that. I love that for you in so many ways. And I feel like a lot of us don't question, I want to say our environment, because it's what we know, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of people, like I cannot stand half the shows that my middle daughter watches or the music that she listens to. So I'm like, they are so hurt, but that's their norm. Like no matter how much money they have, that's what they know, the harsh talking, the down talk, like all of those things. So it's like, even when you're talking about, sometimes when the pastor is talking about God versus what you know about God, I feel like perception is everything. Like two people can read the exact same book, but based on our own experiences, our own environment, all of those things, it affects our perception of that. So I love how you were able to question what is being said, and create your own perception of those words. And I think more of us need to question things. I think as people, and I said this to my partner many, many times, we, not that we shouldn't trust, obviously we should, but we trust certain things too easily without questioning it.
Yeah.
Whether it be something we order in the mail, whether it be something someone says, like, I feel like because I'm such a reflective person, even if something, like even after something happens, I'm sitting there dissecting why, where did that come from? What could have been the other possibilities? Like my brain is doing all these things. So I'm like, why did we trust that so easily? Like, why do we believe that this is what it is just because someone says that's what it, like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And when you say that, like, I just think of how we undervalue people that are sensitive. We value people that are reflective, that are slow to speak, slow to act, like and then we elevate those people that do the absolute most, always talking, always in the front and center, and they get so much attention, you know. And I think that's why we really need to understand, like, there's room for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it is giving space for our quieter friends or sensitive friends to speak up, whether it's affirming our sensitive child to be who they are and to be thankful for the way that they were formed and the healer and thinker that they are. I think when we do that, like, we can now feed off of each other, and we can have like a more like even kind of healed society versus some people taking up a lot more real estate, a lot more space than others.
Absolutely. I feel like culture, society has valued extroverts and the quality of extroverts. And growing up as an introvert, I felt like something was wrong with me. Everyone wants to be a part of stuff or say things or go places. And I'm just like, I'll stay over here in my corner. And after my sister passed and I had to learn to find my own voice, and I started to explore using my voice and speaking up and being present online and all those things, definitely out of my comfort zone. But because the extroverts of the world look at that and they're like, oh, because she's present online or showing up online, then she's extroverted. And then they see me in public and I like do a shy wave and they're like, oh, she's stuck up. No, I have social anxiety. I'm shy. Like it's like culture values the extroverted qualities. And I think the pandemic allowed me to really sit with and honor and, I guess, accept my sensitivities, understanding that, yes, I'm an introvert. Yes, I'm an HSP. I am heavily affected by environment, by sound, by, all these things. I cry for commercials. I'm highly emotional. But instead of feeling ashamed of all those qualities, like honoring them to a place where it allows me to thrive, where I feel like I don't have to go to every networking event that I am invited to anymore. I'm not comfortable. I don't want to. Building deep one-on-one connections, like learning how to thrive based on who I am and not based on who society is trying to tell me to be.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I hope anyone listening that's like you feels affirmed in that moment, right? In this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because seeing what you're doing and how you're fighting through the discomfort to share your story, and not only that, to like amplify other people's story is transformative, is needed, is necessary. And so, so thank you, Makini, for pushing past the discomfort.
Thank you. So before we go to the final segment of the show, I would love if you could tell the listeners where they can stay connected with you, where they can learn more from you, about you.
Yeah, for sure. So you can find me on my website, senaitlitchmore.com. I'm also active on Instagram. My name is Senait on Instagram. So Senait. And you can find out more about me, whether you'd like to work with me, on my website.
Awesome. I will definitely have all your links in the detailed section below the episode so they can just click and connect with you directly.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So for the final segment of the show, it's kind of like a rapid fire. I ask a couple of quick reflective questions. You can answer one word or one sentence. but I also don't like to put people into a box. So if you feel the need to expand, you're more than welcome to do so.
Okay.
All right. Name a book that has changed or greatly impacted your life.
The Gifts of Imperfection by
I love
Brene
it.
Brown.
Okay. When was the last time you cried?
Oh, when was the last time I cried? I feel like maybe last week or something. I think I read a sad story online.
Okay. When and where are you the happiest?
By the water or in the living room with my family.
Love it. Okay. When was the last time you apologized to someone?
Yesterday. I apologize every day. That still shows up sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. What is the first thing you do in the morning and what's the last thing you do at night?
The first thing I do in the morning, turn my alarm off, go back to sleep. One or the other. And at night, the last thing I do at night, I'm always like maybe thinking about something I'm thankful for. I'm always reflecting on, what I'm grateful for before I go to bed.
Nice, nice. Okay. And last but not least, what do you wish women would do more of?
Oh, I wish women would do more of challenging the lies that they believe about their identity. I wish women would do more of lifting each other up and showing up for each other without being prompted or asked.
Love it. Thank you so much tonight for your transparency, for sharing your story, for sharing your wisdom. I truly, truly appreciate you. And this was a long time coming and we should have did this a lot sooner, but thank you so much for being who you are. I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you, Bikini. Thanks for having me.
And to all of you healers out there, until next time, don't forget to rate the show and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We would love to hear what part of Senait's story resonated with you. What were your aha moments? What gems did you take away? Feel free to screenshot this week's episode and you can tag us on Instagram. You can tag Senait at Senait. You can tag myself at The Real McKinney Smith. A healthy community is a healing community, and a healing community is full of hope because it has seen its own people weather, survive, and thrive. So let's continue to heal her.